business as unusual. This is the live stream, and where we press into some of the emerging trends that are reshaping the business landscape. We're going to kick into our topic today in just a few minutes. So if you have any questions, please add them to the chat, and I'm going to try and get to all of them during our session today. So I'm Kathy Steele. I'm your host today, and I'm the CEO of Red Caffeine. And for those of you that are not familiar with Red Caffeine, we are a growth consultancy. And what that means is that we build and execute go-to-market plans for ambitious mid-market organizations. Our service offering includes a fractional team led by a senior level marketing executive, and it allows your team or your company to scale rapidly without hiring a wide variety of full-time marketing and sales staff members. So I'm excited about today's topic because a lot of the things that we do impact communication. We are, at Red Caffeine working on things that impact sales. We're looking on things that impact communication for business leaders, as well as how we're communicating to our internal teams. So I'm really anxious to learn more about the topic. I personally have taken the assessment and I've scored very low. So obviously, I'm hoping to bring a lot of value to our attendees today, but I'm also really, selfishly anxious to learn more myself. So today we have Dr. Brian Glibkowski and my co-host Tom Latteray. We're going to be talking about Brian's pioneering research, which takes an approach to the old thinking that asking the right questions, really centers on, where most people are focused today, around like how to ask great questions. But today's topic is going to take us through how answer intelligence, or AQ, can help provide the construct for providing great answers. So in this session, Brian's going to demonstrate how AQ can help you explain, predict, and emotionally connect and achieve more results by asking more compelling or giving more compelling answers. So I'm still stuck on the questions thing. So this is going to be a huge mind shift for me. So Brian, thank you for joining us. Tom, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Brian, and something that's interesting that's not on your professional bio.
I'll try.
First of all, good answer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Kathy and Tom. And first of all, I like to say, the pressure's on with good answers. I like to say I'm a coach, not a player. So if I fall short of my answers, it's because I can help others better than I can do it myself. Kidding aside, very pleased to be here today. Very brief introduction to myself. My name is Brian Glibkowski. My background is in and out of academia as a professor, and I conducted research on asking questions actually to start with, and that sort of transition, published some research there, that transition to looking at the answer side of the equation where we focused a lot less, and published an academic article, a couple of them, a book on answer intelligence, which you see there, and have gone to market and have partners in 6 continents, including Tom, super sharp sales partner who's on the call right now. And that's basically my background in a nutshell. In terms of something about me that you may not know, I'm not really much of a connoisseur for anything except for coffee. I love coffee. I have like every machine you could possibly buy and tried all the beans. So I love coffee. So I even have my coffee mug here. I'm not going to drink now, but my Tour de France coffee mug with coffee in it for when we're done.
Well, I definitely also appreciate a good cup of coffee, although I'm lazy, so I don't usually make one. But yes, absolutely. Tom, why don't you give a brief intro today as well, and tell us, your role in AQ, or where you've been in this experience.
Kathy. So I'm with M3, Tom Latteray with M3 Learning and Coaching and Consulting. We work with large organizations as big as Google and entrepreneurial companies. But our fundamental underpinning is really all space of how we help salespeople ask really great questions. Quit talking so much and a little bit more intentional, be more proactive about the questions you ask. So you get people. Kathy, as I know you are a golf aficionado, a really good friend, business mentor, Chris Freiberger. About 3 or 4 years ago, I'm working with this gentleman who's really doing some interesting work with that. And I'm sure Brian will get into this, but this AQ starts talking to me about answer intelligence. And he's like, it's maybe not so much really once you ask those questions, how do you then answer so that you're powerfully the clients in a really interesting way. And so I read Brian's book, Meet Him. I saw how not only does his, actually, it lays over almost any sales training we with it. Lands can really integrate and work on top of things that we've taught in the past, but now it creates this really powerful place. Salespeople, leaders, anybody who's having conversations with other humans, there were moments where I was like, "Whoa, that makes a lot of sense," and understand, wow, my strength is here, but there might be some places where I'm actually doing it in the right way. And it was really somebody who's been teaching 30 years. And so I'm really excited about this conversation because I think a lot out of the technology and just the philosophy that Brian brings to the.
Yeah, and Tom, just so you know, you were having a little bit of sound quality issues. So we're going to start by really having Brian kind of kick us off with just giving us more context. So tell us, a little bit about the background of the research that you've done, and then we'd love you to step us through AQ and the answer intelligence process and framework.
Yeah, happy to do it. The original research I did was with the top golf instructors in the world, and we studied them because they were expert communicators. Always great to study experts. And second, they taught a wide range of clients, everything from touring pros you see on TV to your young son or daughter picking up the clubs for the first time. So in research speak, there was no restriction of range. And they taught this diverse group that had a lot of asymmetries. So they were less motivated than the golf instructors, less knowledgeable. They may have known more about different topics than the golf instructors. Maybe they were business executives and the golf instructors maybe didn't have that kind of acumen. But the point is, these asymmetries mirror what we see in sales and marketing and business in general. We constantly have conversations with asymmetries. As a marketing, let's say, organization, and we're selling our services and sales, maybe we're more motivated to sell than the other party is to buy. Or we're more knowledgeable about our product. The client's, more knowledge about the industry. So basically, we could understand how they would navigate conversations, questions, and answers to create greater influence with answers. So that's the background. And you brought up the wheel here. Maybe I'll introduce that briefly, and then pause and get your reaction, and then I can certainly talk some more. One of the key findings was that there are 6 answer types, as shown in this wheel: theory, story, metaphor, action, procedure, and concept, that map to different questions. So with answer intelligence, it is a framework of answers, the 6, but it fully maps to questions. So it's really a framework of communication more broadly. And that's pretty important. Maybe I could give you one example to illustrate, and then I'll do a full hard pause. Let's put it in terms of sales. And my background is, human resource management and organizational behavior as a professor. So I tend to like those kind of examples. But let's imagine, someone in the audience that's a new sales manager. Okay, you've been previously carrying the bags. the sales bag, so to speak, and you're very effective. But now it's a completely different game because you're managing others, you're leading others. And now imagine that you're meeting with a direct report for the first time as a sales manager. That direct report is going to be sizing you up, looking at you, and explicitly or implicitly, they might be thinking or asking the question, what is it like to work with you as a leader, right? That's what they're thinking. And in AQ terms, you want to have answers to that question, and powerful answers are going to make a big difference. So if I'm taking on the persona of this leader, I might say something like, in AQ terms, I could give a concept or metaphor answer, or I could give both. I could say, to me, leadership is inspiring others and holding them accountable. That's a concept answer. It's a definition. And I could say, leadership is like two ropes. When the ropes are separate, they're strong. When they're braided together, they're stronger. That's how I lead. Each meeting, my promise to you is I'm going to inspire you and try to hold you accountable. So basically, illustrated very briefly, a concept and metaphor answer, and you could articulate both in one utterance, and you might want to do that for very important questions. So what AQ is a framework to understand how questions map to answers, and then different techniques of how to navigate those conversations for maximum impact. Last thing I'll say before I turn it back to you, Kathy, I would assert, if you're a leader and you give really strong answers to that implicit or explicit question, what is leadership? What's going to happen? The direct report's going to say, wow, this person, has gravitas. This is someone I want to follow. I'm excited to work with this person, so on and so forth. And so you're really setting great expectations. And then from there, things can, continue on and go forward. So that's just, one example of, in that case, providing, two answers, which we're going to talk about subsequently. But let me pause there and get your reaction to my initial setup.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like as I was stepping through kind of the assessment and the thinking, I don't know if I was completely clear on metaphor versus story. They seem similar to me and things that I've studied. So could you just give an overlay of,
All the answers?
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think that would be super helpful.
Yeah. So, a concept is basically an idea that could be defined and broken down into dimensions. So, I talked about leadership, inspiring others and holding them accountable to achieve a goal, two dimensions, inspiration and accountability. A metaphor relates to making a concept more understandable by comparing dissimilar actions. So basically, the two ropes are sort of the action. The ropes in one domain, and then in another domain, you could think of leadership actions and inspiring someone, holding them accountable, and comparing to the rope sort of helps you understand certain attributes of the metaphor in your world. So another example of a metaphor that I would use oftentimes, let's say if I'm talking about AQ, what is AQ? AQ is like a target. If you don't have a target to aim at, how are you going to hit the bullseye? So that's what I'd say. We've had a target to aim at with questions, right? Let's develop our questions, the 6WH questions, but we need a target of answers to aim at, right? If you're not thinking about the answers. So that's a metaphor. Going up to story and metaphor are related but distinct. So one of the best ways I can explain this very, very concisely is if we think of Romeo and Juliet, right? That's a story. We all know what a story is and the attributes of it. It has a beginning, middle, and end, round characters, a setting. So we know what that is. If you transform Romeo and Juliet to a metaphor, it's star-crossed lovers. So the difference between a metaphor and story is somewhat subtle for those that haven't really thought of it, but the metaphors tend to relate to answers to the what question, concepts, things like, if you're a sales organization, we're efficient, right? We are, trustworthy. We are responsible. We provide value. When you talk about stories, they tend to relate to cause and effect. So the story might be about how efficiency relates to an outcome the client cares about. How providing value relates to, solutions where you can, retain your employees. So stories really are about cause and effect logic, where metaphors are just about a single concept. And then, that's basically the distinction. And theory is cause and effect sort of stripped away from the story. So if we have a story about, for example, the movie Rudy, right? We've seen that movie before, and you could say it's about underdogs. If you're an underdog, that can lead to overperformance, let's say, or something. That's the story, and that's the theory. Underdog leads to overperformance. So it's whatever you think is important as a company, as a sales organization. You may say, if you, let's say if I'm Salesforce, I might say, and this may not be the best theory or example in the world, but systematically managing the process leads to higher sales, right? And so that could be a theory they have. And then they could tell you stories about where that happened, right? Let me tell you a story about a client where that happened. So what we're painting a picture here of is that there are distinct questions, why, what, and how, and they relate to distinct answers going across. And then going to the bottom, I think it's a little bit easier to understand these questions. But, for example, if someone's asking you, Kathy, how do we work with, your company? And you're going to give procedure and action answers. You may say, as a procedure, let me tell you the 3-step process of how we typically onboard someone. Step 1 is this, step 2 is that, step 3 is that. And so a procedure is simply, the steps involved, and then actions are sort of organized in those steps. So you could talk about the steps by which someone would work with your organization, and then you give key actions in each, phase. Like maybe in the first step, the initial onboarding, you're going to, or the initial onboarding, a key action is you're going to survey everyone in the organization or something like that. So that's where we see, distinction between procedures and actions. And you take all this together, and what it gives you is a way to intentionally navigate conversations. And last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to you, Kathy, to see if I've illustrated some of these answer types effectively. And I should say before I do that, the when and where is the context. All the answers exist in the context. And we know if you're selling to a bank, what the story needs to be about a bank. If you're selling to a bakery, the story needs to be about a bakery. So context recognizes that questions and answers are likely to vary depending on the context. Last point I'll make relate to sales or marketing. From a marketing or sales standpoint, you often want to position your organization, and we always talk about like communicating your value proposition. So in AQ terms, what does that mean? We would say it might mean something like this. As a sales organization, can you answer some basic questions about your value proposition? What value do you provide others? Why should someone work with you? How do they work with you? And then you need to provide those answers in all 6 forms. And not only do you need to do it, but everyone in your organization needs to do it. And not only that, every single answer that you provide needs to be high quality, right? And then beyond that, you got to, navigate it in such a way that it's authentic and comes across effectively. So there's a lot of different pieces, but individuals that communicate effectively, we found expert communicators do this intuitively. And so we have a framework that allows you to take, the natural intuition and to organize it in a way you can navigate more intentionally. So let me pause there and see if I've explicated a little bit what these different answer types are.
Yeah, I feel like I have much better context now. I think I was struggling between the story, metaphor, concept area. So just having more clear lines around those 3 for me really, really feels like I'm much more clear. So I think there's,
Can you,
a way they work together. So you've got a couple of other parts of the methodology. So talk a little bit about the answer twice.
Yeah, let me do it. Before we move on to that, I'll just say briefly in this slide. So there's these skills that people can use, we found expert communicators could do. And this slide is talking about the ability to provide 6 answers or provide the best answer. So the way to think of this slide is if someone asks you a single question, what's the best answer you can provide to that question? And that's an important skill, an important ability. If you can do that, you're going to go a long way. So we can move on to the next slide, which is answering twice. And so this slide is getting at the idea that there are different answer types on the left side of the wheel versus the right side of the wheel. The left side of the wheel corresponds to the left side of the brain metaphorically. And if you look at theory, concept, and procedure, those are logical, objective, and sequential. Very different from story, metaphor, and action, which are the opposite. They appeal to the right side of the brain, creative, subjective, random, gestalt. And the idea here is to understand something, understand a question. It's very important. You want to appeal to both sides of the brain. So I already illustrated sort of that example with leadership and inspiring someone, holding them accountable, and then the metaphor of the two ropes. So the idea of answering twice is when you have an important question, in one utterance, you provide a concept and metaphor answer seamlessly, for example. Or if you have a why question, a theory and story seamlessly, or a procedure and action seamlessly. And that's the point of answering twice. And you use it when you have a very important question, when there's confusion on the other side, or both. You don't want to use it all the time because that would be like a monologue. You want to choose your points. So I'll pause there. I think Tom wants to jump in.
Yeah, I was going to ask Tom.
I was just going to say that, I find I love to tell stories. And so in a presentation, I find that I tell, but what I've become aware is that by the time I'm on story 3 or story 4, audience who maybe are like, hey, quit telling stories. Maybe I'd like to hear another part of the week. The thing that I've become very aware of is that it's, my power is those 6 answers. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
That's probably my biggest takeaway from this has been the place of I'm on at least 2 different types of answers and combining those and then trying to wheel to an answer that I'm being heard by almost everyone in the room.
Yeah, I feel like I use concept and metaphor. I honestly feel like I use concept and story. So maybe I need to refine that to theory, especially when I'm trying to talk to a prospective client about their issue and how we've been able to solve that with another client that might be somewhat different in terms of the type of business they're in, but they have a very similar issue that they're going through. So here's the issue you have, this client also had this issue, and then here's the story or here's the example of how we were able to work together to solve that challenge. So does that sound right, Brian? Is that?
It does. And again, you're an effective communicator. Your organization's effective, and you're using some of these same techniques, is what you're saying. And that's not surprising. When we studied the best golf instructors in the world, the way the research works is you study what the best do, and you extract from that the principles of what they're already doing. So I'm sure and confident you're doing a lot of this. For all communicators, myself included, Tom, and I would assert for you, Kathy, there's always opportunity for improvement. Like for me, Tom was saying he focused a lot on story. For me, it was theory, and concept. As a professor, I was the professor that wouldn't have a textbook. I was not really focused on procedures and actions. I wasn't trying to be bad, but I just, it was a blind spot. But I think you get it. And just to, give you maybe just 2 little nuggets sort of connected to AQ here, just examples to illustrate. Tom talked about using something other than story, maybe 2 answer types. Here's a rule of thumb. If you have a conversation with someone else, a real conversation is going to be 3 answer types, like GPS. You need 3 points to triangulate something. That's like saying if I go to CVS and I say, how do I find the Mars candy bar? And someone, tells me a procedure. Go down aisle 1, take a left bottom shelf. I wouldn't call that a conversation. But if that person tells me a procedure, maybe gives me an action to walk me over there, maybe tells me a story about Mars candy bar, now that's a conversation. So that's a good way to think about it. If you're trying to have conversations with people, you're navigating multiple answer types. You're moving around. You're dynamic. So that's one little uh, tidbit. And I'll give you
Brian,
one more unsolicited one.
I was
Yeah,
going
go
to ask
on.
a question, Brian. In the work
Yeah.
you've done with organizations, even from a sales standpoint, that training people to have better communication actually starts enhancing customer rates, maybe the quality of the conversations they're having, maybe speed, seeing that type of action happening because people are mastering this.
Yeah, I think because what this does is it codifies what we do naturally, and when in a high quality setting, like the one of the metaphors I like to give on this is, what is a high quality conversation? This is sort of a surface metaphor, but I like to say, think about the last dinner conversation you've had with a friend. Okay, if you have that dinner conversation with a friend, chances are it's going to have, if it's a good conversation, it's going to have the following attributes: both sides speak about equally, both sides ask and answer questions about equally, both sides are providing interesting answers, interesting questions, right? That's a dinner conversation. If that goes, all those go well, those boxes you get checked, what happens? I want to go to dinner with this person again. If some of those boxes are not checked, what happens? I don't want to go to dinner with that person. If I don't have an opportunity to ask questions or provide answers, or what they're saying is not interesting, I don't want to do that again. Guess what? That's the same thing for a sales marketing conversation. You have to have that level of fluency. No one wants to sit there, for example, and go through a sales process where we're doing discovery and we're asking question after question after question. That's not a dinner party I want to go to. That doesn't work.
Yeah, there's
And
a firing squad versus
firing squad. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll pause and turn it back to the group, is, in our book, we had a chapter on sales AQ that was co-authored from Salesforce and Gong, and Gong records sales calls. And looking at their data, what did they find? Exactly consistent with what I just talked about. Effective sales conversations throughout the funnel are balanced. Both sides speak equally. Both sides ask and answer questions about the same amount. So that's really the standard we're going for. And if that's true, then what that means is we need to be better conversationalists. We need to be better at questions and answers. And that's the point of this framework. You got to do both well, and then you're going to win.
What I loved about this, kind of analogy that we're seeing graphically depicted here was thinking about different people. Sometimes you're talking to one person, but in many cases, in this, especially in sales, you might be talking to multiple stakeholders in the decision process, and even thinking about somebody that it leans more towards being a left brain person versus a right brain person, being able, it feels like you're constantly toggling between those two kind of personality or brain types. And that could be really effective in appealing to a group of people, because you're likely covering something procedurally for somebody that is very methodical, but then you're also talking about the action and like say yes to the dress, Tom, or something like that, where they're seeing themselves experiencing the benefit of your product and service in a compelling way.
Kathy, one of the things people don't want to be educated, they want to be validated. And I think what's fascinating about this, one of somebody is by speaking to them in the way that they want to be spoken. So if I'm naturally a right brain, I love telling stories, but I'm a person who they'd be better served by a procedure, and I keep telling them stories, or I keep giving them metaphors. I'm giving them colorful language, or whatever. I reckon that whatever I say isn't going to land for them in the way that it
right.
I can validate them by actually learning how to communicate in their style versus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think we probably have a slide coming up about answering with style that really gets on this really explicitly. But before we do,
why don't we talk about it'd be best to go to compliments.
Yeah, let's go on. Let's move on. So now, basically you'll see each of these skills are different ways to navigate the wheel. That's what we're talking about. Sort of like basketball. If you're a basketball player and you're trying to score, what do? You have a jump shot, a 3-pointer, a free throw, a layup, a dunk, a hook shot, all these different ways to score. So this is another way to score, another way to answer. And each of these have different rules of engagement. So this is called providing compliments. And the idea here is we're talking about compliments. Everyone loves a compliment. That's the funny joke. But by that, we mean adjacent answers. So answers that are next to each other on the wheel. So this tells us an order of how to navigate conversations. So, for example, if I'm talking about, that meeting that sales rep for the first time and I lay out a concept, I want to inspire you and hold you accountable, right? And a logical question might be, after they understand what that is, how are you going to do that, right? So then I need to lay out a procedure that explains, 3-step process of how I'm going to inspire them. So I might say, I don't even know. I've never tried to answer that one directly, but let's see if we can make something up on the fly. Tom can help me out. Like a procedure, you might say, well, I'm going to inspire you by letting you work with the best sales reps in the world. How am I going to do that? You're going to go on sales calls with, the procedure is we're going to identify the best sales reps in our industry, and we're going to reach out to them, and we're going to set up calls in different companies, and you're going to go on Zoom calls with 5 people a quarter that we've never talked to before. Okay, I just made that up. That's a procedure, and if that could really be exciting. That's going to inspire me. If I'm a sales rep, I'm going to go on calls with people in different industries that are the best at what they do. Wow, So anyways, the point is, there's this flow of conversations. And they sort of, it's a natural way that conversations are going to progress. Now, I'll just say one other thing to punctuate this. So if I'm selling my service as a sales rep or marketing, and I talk about efficiency or something like that, and I really explain what the concept is, I'm talking to an executive buyer, they're going to know, well, why is efficiency important? I need to tell them the theory, right? And moving up to the top, and I could say, when you increase your efficiency, you're going to have more opportunities to close deals. Maybe that's something Salesforce could say or something, right? When you have more efficiency, you're going to have more opportunities to close deals. Whatever it is, whatever the compelling theory is. So these are, this is a whole nother way of navigating conversations that a skilled sales rep is going to know how questions are going to follow and flow with each other.
Yeah, I love it.
It's almost things we see as people who actually do this well. It's almost like I give you the gift and there's a bow on. It's like it's not just me giving you and there's a bow on top of it. And so just by thinking about taking 3 or 4, your answer just multiplies itself. And then I tell you this, and then I tell you this, and it's all enhancing the answer. It's addressing different points, maybe the way that I want to be, that I want to hear, that I'm going to get it in a way that maybe I wouldn't get it if you only gave me one of those answers.
Yeah, just like an exclamation point at the end. So in terms of kind of the next step in the process, that really is around the style of the answer. So can you step us through that part of the concept?
Yeah. So this is, again, another way to navigate the wheel. And I think we're going to
next slide.
Yeah. So this is another way to navigate the wheel. And this is getting at individual differences. So as I'm, here on the call here, maybe you could identify yourself, Kathy, where you think you are if you had to choose one. But this is about individual differences. It's about my preferences of communication and the preferences of the other party. So basically, this is where the colors come in. So relational style is a preference for stories and metaphors. It's a preference for experiences and emotional connections. Okay. The analytical style, yellow, is about explaining and predicting in a complex world. That's concepts and theory. And finally, practical style is procedures and actions. Is about getting work done. So I'll say a couple things and turn it over to the group here. Like Tom, for example, sort of identifying with story. Very relational style. And you need to know that because you don't want to provide too many stories. You want to lean into what you're good at. But you also want to look at the audience. What kind of style do they prefer? So, for example, if Tom is selling and or engaging in marketing or any conversation, maybe he's talking to, let's say, a stereotypical operational buyer, very focused on the how. So maybe the default assumption is Tom wants to get to a story. Let me tell you why we want to work with you. Right, here's a story. He's excited about it, but maybe what he could do, is lean into the preference of the other party and say, I know you're concerned about how we're going to do this. I want to briefly tell you a 3-step procedure of how our process works. I want to make sure you feel comfortable. And they walk through it. And then all of a sudden, that person, the procedural person, is now has their most important question answered. Now they're open to hear the story. So now we're talking about navigating styles and preferences. And for me, like I said, I'm an analytical style. I was naturally good at relational, but I sort of abdicated my responsibility at procedures and actions, and I wouldn't even go in there. And the last point I'll make is the best communicators in the world, they combine the colors together. These are primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. You combine them together, you can use all the answer styles. That's what the best do. That's what these golf instructors could do. They could fly around to any style. They were comfortable everywhere, amazing communicators. We've done work looking at like Steve Jobs and Martin Luther King, and they have qualities that allow them to move naturally across all these different areas.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this. I definitely related more to the relational style, but I love analytics so much that I tend to base some of my, in storytelling on analytical, backgrounders. I think practical style is more challenging for me as well, but I definitely see the value in having the going black where all the colors are meshed together and they create the inner circle of answering with style to be able to go between all of the style sets. But back to, again, I think about the left brain, right brain here too, is job title predictive to, where the styles tend to go? Like if I'm meeting with an HR or operations person, would I try and make the assumption that they're going to be more on the practical or analytical style spectrum?
Yeah, I think, a lot of that research that we can do and substantiate, individual differences by industry or job function, that work hasn't been done. So I'll say that. But I will say anecdotally, I think there is a correlation between certain job types and preferences. For example, before I did my TEDx talk on answer intelligence, I did a presentation at Nokia, and there were a couple hundred engineers in the audience. One of the best receptions I've ever had, but extremely analytical. And I think the reason they liked AQ because it was related to theory and concept. It was a framework they could get their heads around how to communicate effectively. Because they didn't like what was out there. Basically, you want to body language, or you want to whatever the anecdotal advice was, but there's not a lot of frameworks of communication. So they like that. But then, other types, you see creative types, obviously tend to be more story and metaphor, So I think there is a correlation between job types and style. But that being said, I think I want to emphasize this. All the questions and answers are important.
Yeah.
So for example, I don't care what your style is. I can give you examples that you care about each of these answer types. Again, if you go to CVS to buy a candy bar, how do I find a candy bar? You're concerned about procedures. Someone to tell you how to get it.
Right. You want to hear about the last time
Yeah.
you ate a candy bar, right?
Yeah, and I'll just give you one more example and I'll stop. But we all love to go to the movies. I know a lot of accountants that like to go to the movies and, listen to stories and metaphors. So, I think we don't want to lean too heavily into these individual differences. And instead, let's think about, the fundamental questions that are going to be important to navigating any important conversation. You want to navigate all the questions ultimately for a really important conversation.
And so the last part of the framework is really around getting into the context part of the framework.
Yeah. So this is, the when and where, and you see the arrows. It's meant to cover the entire wheel and also all the other questions: why, what, and how. if you're like, for example, if the context is a TED talk or something, you're going to focus on why and what questions, not how questions. Let me even tell you an hour how you're going to do something. Usually not. But if we're doing, like Steve Jobs in a product launch, we see those fancy sound bites on the news that are the why and what, but most of it in product launch is about the how question, procedures and actions, and it's very, things like that, maybe some technical things. But context is recognizing that the answers may or may not be different depending on the context. So, we talked about stories may vary depending on the context, but then we also know that you can have universal stories that will appear across context. So it's this understanding when and where certain answers may be different. So, for example, if I'm talking, and I just did this recently with a large financial organization, very sophisticated, but they're not really doing a lot with AI yet. So I really need to start with what is AI? Explain
Right.
that to them. You contrast that to an organization that's done 2 or 3 implementations. I don't need to explain what AI is. And maybe you need to explain how our solution is going to work, or maybe what our particular flavor of AI is, et cetera, and so forth. So it's that subtle understanding of context is going to be the difference between winning and losing, because you answer the question they already know, they're going to hit the snooze button and you lost.
And
Yeah.
Brian, that doesn't work in just sales conversations. That really communication with anybody. So if I'm a leader, how I utilize this in community work to me. If I am a husband, communicating with my children. I mean, this can apply across the board, right?
Absolutely. Leave it at that.
So with the we were going to step into some scenarios. So Brian, we're going to let you kind of share the technology that you use. We're going to try and do some interactivity and see how that goes, just to give some of the context to how you're using AQ.
Perfect. So I'm going to go into, we have a software enabled platform that uses AI, and we'll just go through something. Multiple applications. It's something you could use to prepare for a conversation. You're a sales leader, a regular leader. So this is sort of the admin side. So I need a topic. So I don't know if this could be anything: sales, marketing, it could be leadership, closing deals, motivation of an employee. Maybe you could just guide me, Kath. Let's do this on the fly. What kind of topic do you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's stick with sales since that's the context. Do you have an idea, Tom?
Yeah, I would say let's, Brian, we're going to get ready to call on it. That is in the, let's call him in the tech, the new client in the same space who is trying to increase
What are they trying to increase, Tom?
their customer retention rate.
Okay. So you put a little bit in the context here. So I'm setting up a game here. I'm a sales manager preparing to meet with a new prospect and put something in the context. So I could say, I could add more details on what Tom said. So the client is in the high tech industry and is looking to retain clients given steep competition. We have a solution that will help them retain clients. So it's kind of general, but you put in here the more information, and it's going to change things. So we hit next, and there's some more stuff behind the scenes. We want to provide the answer, ask questions. This is sort of an admin setup, so there's a lot of things you could do. And then finally, I'm going to skip this. I'm going to say no background concept. That's just adding some complexities. And I could put a note here that could say, this is a live podcast demo, and I could search this later. So I hit next, and now all this information with other prompts and parameters are going to AI, and everything we see in the screen here is generated by AI. So first of all, it's saying the new prospect can ask you, the sales manager, these 3 questions. I can modify these questions, sort of type in the box, or write in my own. So let me ask Kathy here, Uh, you like any of these questions?
Yeah, I like them all.
Okay. How about let's go with number 3.
Yeah.
Since you like them all, what makes your solution stand out from your competitors? Wow. So this is a question they may ask directly or implicitly, but this is something, you might have to answer. So this is, prepping, getting some reps in. And you press view answers, and then the AI is going to generate concept and metaphor answers. So this is the answer that I could provide as the sales manager. I could say, um, you know, our solution is going to help you understand your customer needs, build long-term relationships, provide ongoing support. And, you know, then I can rate these answers and say, well, it was great or it wasn't great. And it depends on the prompts we put in, but there's a metaphor here and the diamond in the rough. So this is, the metaphor, it just generates a single metaphor, may or may not like it. And the idea here is as we go through and choose things and maybe modify questions, we move on to other questions. So we just answered some what questions. What could be a subsequent how question that the prospect might ask? So just like a conversation, as you build on the prior questions, they get more precise and they relate to previous answers you selected. Um, then you can select one of these questions. How can we tailor our solution to meet our customers' specific needs in the high tech industry? So that might be something that would be asked by the prospect. You press view answers, and the solution, the system will generate a 5-step procedure. So this is something we could do. These 5 steps, and then for each of the steps, there's different actions. And we're going through this very quickly, but if you put some more parameters in the front end, or if we're working with a company, we're going to start to have information that is sort of hard coded in the system, about the nature of the clients and all this stuff, and the answers that are going to be spit out, and the questions are going to be really highly calibrated. And so the purpose of this tool is to go through, you can use it for within the context of a training environment, of course, but you could use this prior to sales calls or any important meeting. So we have large consulting firms that will use this on very important, engagement calls or sales calls to go through a couple rounds to calibrate their answers. And these are, huge sticker projects, but the sentiment is that even though we're fully prepared, we go through a couple rounds of this, we're going to learn something new. We're going to learn something that can make the difference between winning and losing, and that makes it all worthwhile. And so that's basically it. And the results then are saved in a library, all results. And let's see here. And you see them here. And we just did 2 of them right here. I could just go back to them and click here, and we have sort of a library we can search and get hundreds of different responses that can be shared across the organization. And we're basically building our answer muscles for specific conversations. So let me stop there and get your comments and reactions to this.
So, Brian, I was going to say that what I know you're seeing is that doing this to kind of almost populate their sales roadmap, their sales scripts. And these are the ways that we prepare for our best opportunities. We're walking in literally with answers for all 6 of those and the team feels like they are really prepared to go in and answer. Who's in the audience? I can answer some questions that are going to appeal to all of them.
Exactly. And we have multiple applications that are purpose built for different things. This is one of them. And I would say some of the ways the clients are using it is, particularly when you have your own environment set up and things are calibrated for your world, you go in there. How do you know when you're ready for a conversation? When the questions come up and you know the answers before the output comes, right? And you nothing new is coming. You go through a couple rounds. You what do you say? I'm ready. I'm ready. I've went through, the gauntlet, and I'm ready for the conversation. So, this is built on principles we already know about. How do we get ready for a call? We prep with questions. We try to develop and think through answers that may come. What this does is sort of, standardizes that process, makes it more intentional, brings in AI answers, which are extremely important. Because you could have a sales call and like one of those questions you like, Kathy, You can spend 25 minutes spinning your wheels like, oh, how would I answer that? I don't know. Where do I get started? Now you have answers coming in, and everything flows. So it offers all these benefits that, Tom has been using to do role playing and to prepare reps and to get them ready for highly elevated conversations. Last thing I'll say is the goal here with AQ, the best communicators in the world, what they do? They perform at a high level, they navigate conversations effectively, and they have more time, energy, and influence than anyone else. So when we interviewed, for example, one of the top golf instructors in the world, is rated by Golf Digest. He was on the Golf Digest top 50 list, and there's over 25,000 golf instructors in the U.S. alone. He's top 50, upper half of the 99th percentile. He taught half the people on the top 50 list. So this is the expert's expert. And I asked him at the end of the interview, I said, you're an amazing communicator. Do you get the metaphors right? You know what he said? Yes. And if I don't, I have another one at the ready. Then he went on to tell me more things that seemed unbelievable. In the first 2 minutes, he's going to fundamentally change their golf swing. And this wasn't hyperbole. This was someone at the top of their craft that was an expert communicator that could influence someone like that, that you wanted to spend more time with, that you had energy with when you talked about with them. That's what we want to achieve. If we can achieve that level, what's going to happen? Sales are going to go up. People are going to respect you. They want to follow you into battle, et cetera, and so forth. So that's what this machine can do, the software, in combination with, expert guidance from someone like Tom.
Yeah. I mean, I first of all, I need the intro to that golf instructor for sure. But aside from that, I feel like there's so many applications. Again, we all practice our pitches, we practice our question set, but I have never been, really diligent about practicing how I would answer certain things. And, when you're more seasoned, it's definitely, you've got things to kind of pull from because you've just been around the block for a long time. But there's still lots of times where you're asked something completely out of left field, and that extemporaneous answer is you either do well or you totally blow it. So I feel like that I can see just so many applications, even when we're working with a client and prepping our team to give a presentation. They're all ready for what they're going to talk about, and then a question comes in that they're not ready for, and that's where you see somebody unravel. And so that to me is just super powerful.
Great, thank you.
The more we help people, actually they don't really recognize they had that space of so for me, I'm a big relation. The more I exercise that practical style, and I get muscles that feel like, oh, I don't necessarily need to even prepare that much anymore, because I've gone through a bunch of. Really, the only way you can get good at this is by actually practicing it, right? And that it's not your strength. And so how do I now address that? And then the way to do that is do more reps. And before you know it, you can start answering all of those 6 styles.
Do more reps. And here's a metaphor, plug for working with Tom. He's doing some extraordinary stuff in the sales space. It's sort of like having a batting cage. That's what AQ is, a batting cage in the software. But then you want a coach to work with you. And you combine those together.
Mm-hmm.
If you have both those pieces, then all of a sudden you're hitting the curveball, you're hitting the fastball, you're hitting all these other things, you're getting your reps in, and it's practice. We know this in sports, and so often in sales we reference sports, but again, many people lament we don't train like sports. Right. We just go to the games and we play, but we don't put in that practice. And so what we're saying is we're not treating communication as a skill. This is a skill that you can develop and anyone can get better at. And, so.
Good, because I got a 52. So I'm definitely want my score to go up. So I'm going to retake the assessment again and see how I do now that I'm much more clear on the concepts. So Brian, really quick, Kathy, before we wrap up.
Your initial score was high, by the way, just so you know.
It was.
I think I was a 40. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. All right. Well, there you go. What's to come here, Brian? I'm curious. You're collecting a lot of data. I would assume this could be really distilled down into some great insights. I'm already seeing another book. What's next on your mind?
Yeah, there's another book in the works. We're starting to work with some really large enterprises, doing some really interesting integrations with proprietary large language models and all kind of things that are super exciting. I'm still very fixated on the intersection between AI and people, and I think there's just more of that to come. And the metaphor I'd like to leave us with, we showed a little bit of AI, is that it's not about scripts. It's about upskilling knowledge, how to navigate. And one of the metaphors I'll just leave you with about where we'd like to go with our platform we're developing is sort of like a race car driver. Before we had cars, we were in races. It's in a very crude way. It's sort of like AI. We were walking around. Now AI is here. It's accelerating things. But guess what? We still need drivers. And in a competitive marketplace where everyone has cars, what distinguishes, the race? The Indy 500, they all have the same cars. NASCAR, same cars. It's the quality of the drivers. So that's never going to go away. So how can we, from our standpoint, provide the best cars in the world for AI, coupled with connecting to the best drivers, the best coaches, the best pit crews. So I'm just really excited about the potential. I'm very optimistic about the potential of AI, the potential of humans, and we just want to sort of live in that space with partners that share that vision.
Yeah, I mean, phenomenal. I feel like we've been using AI in sales and marketing a lot. It's, I think, enabling us to do so much, but this really is very interesting to me and how you're leveraging AI to help, really prep people. So I can't believe how quickly the time has gone, but I want to thank you guys both. It was just a thrill to have you. I'm sure people will have a ton more questions. This is such new thinking that I always feel like, wow, when I learn something new or see something completely out of my realm, I'm really enthusiastic about it. And thank you so much, Brian. I can't wait to learn more. Thank you, as always, Tom, for being my co-host, as well as our sponsor. We want to give a nod to M3 and HR Source, who are sponsors of the Business as Unusual live stream series and help us create and meet great people and provide great content. And then I want to tell everyone about what's happening next. We're going to be talking about rebranding. Like, when is it time to rebrand? And so we're going to have David Doyle. He's the president and CEO of Heidenhain Corporation. And, there are a lot of triggers that sort of help an organization decide whether it's time to rebrand. So things like they're not really differentiated against their competition, or the market is really evolving, or they want to enter a new market. There's a lot of activity going on in the M&A space, and that also is a catalyst for rebranding. So David's going to take us through some of the rationale that Heidenhain has used for a rebranding initiative in their portfolio of brands. So we're going to talk through, the overall process of rebranding. It's obviously a lot more than just your logo, and why they invested in the rebranding process for one of their portfolio companies, Accurite. So again, I want to thank our guests for joining us on this live stream. I'm Kathy Steele, and it was just a pleasure to have, Tom and Brian and talk about these topics. I really hope that people got a lot of, at least baseline information about how to improve their communication styles, how to provide better answers. We will share, Brian's access to the assessment in our recap and notes. So I really encourage people to take the assessment and see how you're doing. I think it really brings this kind of theory into context. And I hope you'll join us next time. But until next time, let's continue to challenge the usual and